Admiral Zexton stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's wrath watching the blue planet grow larger on the main screen. His 4 eyes focused on the small world that had been sending strange signals across space for the past 50 cycles. The signals were weak and primitive, but they showed clear signs of intelligence. "Admiral, we are receiving another transmission from the planet," reported Commander Valk, his second in command. The tall, gray-skinned officer worked at his control station with practiced efficiency. "Play it," Zexton ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered dozens of worlds for the hegemony. The speakers crackled to life with sounds that seemed almost musical. Strange voices spoke in patterns that suggested language, though no translator in the fleet could understand it. Mixed with the voices were other sounds, mechanical noises, electronic beeps, and what seemed to be some form of entertainment. "Interesting," Zexton said, stroking the ridge of bone that ran along his jaw. "They seem to have developed basic communication technology. What does our scan show about their military capabilities?" The science officer, a short being with 6 arms, looked up from her station. "Admiral, long-range scans show approximately 12 vessels in orbit around the planet. They appear to be armed, but the technology seems very basic. Our ships could destroy them without taking any damage." Zexton nodded. This was typical for primitive species. They always tried to defend themselves, but their weapons were usually hundreds of years behind hegemony technology. Still, the hegemony preferred to follow protocol. First, they would offer the species a chance to join willingly. If they refused, then conquest would follow. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. The communications officer worked at his station for several minutes. "Channel open, Admiral. We are transmitting on multiple frequencies." Zexton stepped forward, his tall frame casting a shadow across the bridge. "Attention, inhabitants of the 3rd planet. I am Admiral Zexton of the Hegemony Fleet. Your species has been selected for integration into our empire. You will surrender your military forces and accept hegemony rule. In return, you will receive protection and access to advanced technology. You have 1 standard day to respond." The transmission ended, and the bridge fell silent. Now they would wait. Most species took time to discuss among themselves before responding. Some accepted immediately, grateful for the chance to join the galactic community. Others needed more convincing. Hours passed before a response came. When it did, it surprised everyone on the bridge. "Hegemony Fleet, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. We have received your message and discussed it among our people. We appreciate your offer, but we must respectfully decline. Earth wishes to remain independent and develop at our own pace. We hope you will respect our decision." The voice was calm and polite but firm. Zexton had heard similar responses before, though usually with more fear and desperation. This human seemed almost casual about rejecting the most powerful empire in the galaxy. "Interesting," Zexton said. "They speak with confidence for such a primitive species. Commander Valk, what is our current fleet strength?" 500 ships, Admiral, including 20 heavy cruisers and 5 dreadnoughts. More than enough to handle their 12 vessels." Zexton considered his options. The hegemony's rules were clear. Species that refused integration would be conquered or destroyed. But something about this situation intrigued him. These humans seemed different somehow. "Open the channel again," he said. "Captain Chen, I must inform you that refusal of our offer will result in military action. Your 12 ships cannot hope to defeat our fleet. I strongly advise you to reconsider." The response came quickly. "Admiral, we understand the odds. But sometimes principles matter more than survival. If you choose to attack, we will defend our world with everything we have." Zexton felt a rare emotion, respect. These humans knew they would die, but they chose to fight anyway. It was admirable in a futile sort of way. "Very well," he said. "You have made your choice. Prepare for battle." The next few hours were spent positioning the fleet and preparing for combat. The humans also seemed to be preparing, though their 12 ships looked pathetic compared to the massive hegemony fleet that filled the space around their planet. When the battle began, It was unlike anything Zexton had seen before. The human ships moved with incredible coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. They used tactics that made no sense according to standard military doctrine. Instead of trying to maintain distance and exchange fire, they charged directly at the hegemony ships. The first human vessel, barely the size of a hegemony corvette, accelerated at impossible speeds toward the Dominion's wrath. Weapons fire from dozens of hegemony ships lit up space around it, but somehow it avoided most of the damage. "What are they doing?" Commander Valk asked, confusion clear in his voice. Zexton watched in fascination as the small human ship collided with one of his heavy cruisers. The explosion was massive, destroying both vessels instantly. "They're using their ships as weapons," he realized. "They're ramming us." More human ships followed the same pattern. They would accelerate toward hegemony vessels, take massive damage, then crash into their targets at the last moment. It was suicide, but it was effective. Each collision destroyed or severely damaged a hegemony ship. The human ships also carried weapons that seemed impossible. One vessel fired projectiles that moved faster than light, punching through hegemony shields as if they didn't exist. Another ship released clouds of small objects that attached to hegemony hulls and exploded with tremendous force. "Admiral, they're using primitive kinetic weapons but with some kind of advanced propulsion system," the science officer reported. "And those explosives, they seem to be some form of antimatter." "Antimatter?" Zexton was shocked. "That's restricted technology. How could a primitive species develop antimatter weapons?" But there was no time to wonder. The battle was becoming more intense by the minute. The humans fought with a desperation and creativity that the hegemony had never encountered. They used debris from destroyed ships as weapons, fired into their own vessels to create directed explosions, and even detached parts of their ships to ram hegemony fighters. One human ship, badly damaged and clearly dying, transmitted a message on all frequencies. "For Earth, for humanity, remember us." Then it accelerated directly toward Zexton's flagship. The Dominion's wrath fired everything it had, but the human ship kept coming. At the last second, it exploded in a burst of light that temporarily blinded everyone on the bridge. When the light faded, the human ship was gone, but so was a large section of the flagship's hull. Emergency alarms filled the bridge as repair crews rushed to seal the breach. "Damage report," Zexton ordered. "Hull breach on decks 15 through 20. We've lost main power to the forward weapon systems, but we'll survive, Admiral." The battle continued for another hour. One by one, the human ships were destroyed. But each death cost the hegemony dearly. By the time the last human vessel fell silent, Zexton had lost 37 ships, including 2 heavy cruisers. For 12 primitive vessels, the humans had fought like demons. "Admiral," the communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet. Put it through." The voice was different this time, older, more formal. "Hegemony Fleet, this is President Martinez of Earth. Our defenders are gone, but our spirit remains unbroken. We know you will probably destroy our world now, but future generations will remember that humanity chose freedom over slavery. We die with honor." Zexton stared at the planet below. Standard procedure called for orbital bombardment of the major population centers, followed by occupation of the surviving settlements. But something held him back. "Admiral," Commander Valk asked, "your orders?" "Begin the bombardment," Zexton said finally, "but target only military installations. Leave the population centers intact." It was a small mercy, but it was all he could offer. As the bombardment began, he watched explosions bloom across the planet's surface. Each flash of light represented the destruction of human military technology and infrastructure. When it was over, the planet was defenseless but not destroyed. Most of the population had survived. "Admiral, long-range sensors are detecting a small object leaving the planet," the science officer reported. "It appears to be some kind of probe or message. Capsule. Shall we destroy it?" asked the weapons officer. Zexton considered for a moment. "No, let it go. It's probably just a historical record or a final message to their gods." It can't harm us. The probe disappeared into the depths of space, carrying its unknown cargo away from the conquered world. Later, as the fleet prepared to leave the system, Sexton recorded his official report. He described the conquest as successful, but noted the unusual fighting spirit of the humans. He recommended that the species be watched carefully, as they showed more potential than most primitive cultures. What he didn't mention in his report was the strange feeling he had during the battle. The humans had fought as if they were buying time, not just dying heroically. Several times he had noticed human ships transmitting data even as they were being destroyed. It was almost as if they were studying hegemony tactics and technology, learning even in their final moments. But that was impossible. The human fleet was destroyed. Their world was conquered. What could they possibly learn that would matter now? As the Dominion's Wrath entered hyperspace, heading back to hegemony territory, none of the crew noticed the small probe that had escaped earlier. It was already far away, following a course that would take it deep into unexplored space. Inside the probe was a simple message. They rejected the terms. Recommend Protocol 7. Full tactical data. Attached. Avenge the 12. The message was addressed to coordinates that existed in no known star chart, sent to receivers that the hegemony had never detected. Across the galaxy, in hidden bases and secret colonies, other humans began to receive the transmission. Admiral Sexton had won his battle, but he had no idea what he had just started. The 12 ships that died defending Earth were not humanity's last hope. They were just the beginning. The real war was about to start. 6 months had passed since the conquest of Earth, and Admiral Sexton found himself stationed at the edge of hegemony space, dealing with another rebellion on a mining world. The victory over the humans had brought him fame throughout the Empire. Military academies now taught courses on the Earth campaign, using his tactics as examples of proper conquest procedures. High Command had been so impressed with his efficient victory that they had promoted him and given him command of the outer rim fleets. It was considered a prestigious assignment, though Sexton sometimes missed the excitement of exploring new worlds. Admiral, we have another status report from Earth, Commander Valk said, approaching with a datapad in his hands. Sexton looked up from his own reports. How are the humans adapting to hegemony rule? Better than expected, sir. They've been surprisingly cooperative. Their leaders seem to understand that resistance is futile. Production quotas are being met, and there have been no major incidents. Good, Sexton said, though something about the report bothered him. In his experience, conquered species usually took years to fully accept their new situation. The humans had adapted almost too quickly. Across the galaxy and the capital system of the hegemony, other reports were arriving that painted a different picture. Ambassador Krell sat in his office in the Intelligence Ministry, reviewing reports from across the Empire. As the hegemony's chief intelligence officer, he was responsible for monitoring threats both inside and outside their territory. Lately, he had been noticing some disturbing patterns. Assistant Vex, bring me the reports. From Sectors 7 through 12, he called out to his aide. The young officer hurried over with a stack of datapads. Sir, these are the incident reports you requested. There have been 17 major accidents in those sectors over the past 4 months. Krell began reading through the reports. A critical shipyard in Sector 7 had suffered a complete computer system failure, setting back ship production by months. A major supply depot in Sector 9 had experienced a series of explosions that destroyed thousands of tons of military equipment. Communication relays throughout Sector 12 had been malfunctioning, causing delays in military coordination. Each incident had been investigated and explained. Computer failures were blamed on aging systems. Explosions were attributed to improper storage procedures. Communication problems were credited to solar radiation and equipment wear. But Krell had been in intelligence work for over 200 years, and he knew that this many accidents was not normal. Vex, pull up the star charts for these sectors. I want to see the locations of these incidents. The holographic display showed a three-dimensional map of hegemony space. Red dots marked the locations of the mysterious accidents. To most observers, they would seem random, scattered across dozens of systems with no clear pattern. But Krell saw something else. The incidents formed a rough line through space, following the major trade routes and military supply lines. More importantly, they were all located along the paths that led from the core worlds toward the outer rim, toward Earth. Vex, when did these incidents begin? The assistant checked his records. The first one was reported 3 months ago, sir. About 3 months after the conquest of Earth. Krell felt a chill run through his body. He had lived through dozens of conquered worlds, and he had seen revenge attacks before. But they usually came immediately after conquest, driven by anger and desperation. Strategic attacks that took months to plan and execute were something else entirely. Get me a meeting with the High Council, he ordered. Priority 1. The meeting took place the next day in the Grand Council chamber on the capital world. 12 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat around a circular table, representing different species and regions of the Empire. Chancellor Morvek, a massive creature with armored skin and multiple heads, spoke first. Ambassador Krell, your request for an emergency meeting was most unusual. What crisis requires our immediate attention? Krell activated the holographic display and showed the Council the pattern of incidents he had discovered. Honored Council, members, I believe we are facing a coordinated attack on our infrastructure. These incidents are not accidents, they are sabotage. High Admiral Thox, the military leader of the hegemony, laughed dismissively. Sabotage? By whom? We are the most powerful empire in the galaxy. No species would dare attack us directly. That's exactly my concern, Krell replied. These attacks are not direct. They are subtle, designed to look like accidents, and they are being carried out by someone with detailed knowledge of our systems and supply routes. Council member Zara, representing the merchant guilds, looked at the data with interest. The supply depot explosions have cost us significant resources. If these are attacks, we need to find who is responsible. I believe, Krell said carefully, that we should investigate the possibility that these attacks are related to our recent conquest of Earth. The council chamber fell silent. Then High Admiral Thox burst into laughter. The humans we destroyed. Their entire fleet. Their world is under our control. How could a conquered species carry out attacks across the galaxy? That's what concerns me, Krell insisted. According to our intelligence, we destroyed all human military assets. Yet these attacks began shortly after the conquest and follow patterns that suggest inside knowledge of our operations. Chancellor Morvek's multiple heads turned to look at each other before focusing on Krell. Ambassador, your concerns are noted, but we cannot base policy on speculation. Unless you have concrete evidence that humans are involved in these incidents, we must assume they are coincidental. But Chancellor, the matter is closed, Morvek declared. The human threat was eliminated at Earth. Admiral Zexthon's victory was complete and decisive. We will not waste resources chasing shadows. As Krell left the meeting, he felt a deep sense of unease. His experience told him that something was very wrong, but without proof he could not convince the council to take action. What he didn't know was that his instincts were absolutely correct. Far from the council chambers, in the deep space between star systems, strange things were happening. Long-range sensors occasionally detected gravitational anomalies, massive objects moving through space where nothing should exist. Ships sent to investigate found nothing, but their crews reported feeling watched by unseen eyes. On remote worlds, throughout the galaxy, small groups of humans had begun appearing. They claimed to be traders, refugees, or explorers who had left Earth before the conquest. Most local authorities believed these stories and allowed the humans to settle quietly in their communities. These humans were different from the conquered population of Earth. They were confident, well-equipped, and seemed to know far more about galactic technology than they should. But they kept to themselves and caused no trouble, so they were largely ignored. What the authorities didn't realize was that these humans were gathering intelligence. They studied hegemony military procedures, mapped supply routes, and identified critical infrastructure. The information they collected was transmitted to hidden receivers using communication methods that hegemony technology could not detect. The probe that had escaped from Earth 6 months earlier had reached its destination, a hidden base in a star system that did not appear on any hegemony chart. The base was built inside a large asteroid, invisible to conventional sensors and powered by technology that seemed impossible. The base was not empty. Hundreds of humans worked there, analyzing the data from the Earth battle and planning their response. These were not the conquered humans of Earth. These were members of humanity's real military, returning from exploration, missions in distant galaxies to find their homeworld under attack. Captain Marcus Webb stood in the command center, reading the final transmission from Earth. His face was hard with controlled anger as he reviewed the tactical data from the battle. 12 ships, he said quietly. They sent cadets to face a fleet of 500. The Academy training squadron was all that was in the system when the hegemony arrived, replied Colonel Singh, his second in command. They bought us time and gave us intelligence on enemy capabilities. They died for nothing, Webb said bitterly. While we were exploring distant galaxies, our children were dying to protect a world we had already evacuated. Not for nothing, Singh corrected. Their sacrifice gave us everything we need to plan our counterattack. Look at this data. Hegemony shield frequencies, weapon capabilities, ship design weaknesses. The Academy squadron recorded everything before they died. Webb studied the tactical reports. The human ships had been equipped with advanced sensors that recorded every detail of the hegemony attack. Even as they died, the young officers had continued transmitting data, creating a complete picture of enemy capabilities. How long until our fleets can reach hegemony space? Webb asked. The first fleet is already in position. Admiral Chen's task force should arrive in hegemony territory within the week. The second and third fleets will follow at intervals. Webb nodded. Admiral Sarah Chen was the sister of Captain Sarah Chen, who had died defending Earth. She had requested command of the revenge mission, and nobody had been willing to deny her. What about the sabotage operations? Proceeding according to schedule, Singh reported. Our infiltration teams have successfully targeted 17 critical installations. Hegemony supply lines are already showing signs of strain. When our fleets arrive, their ability to respond will be severely limited. Good, Webb said. The hegemony thinks they conquered humanity with one easy battle. It's time to show them the truth. Meanwhile, on the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Zexthan was dealing with the latest in a series of equipment failures. The communications array had malfunctioned during a critical operation, causing confusion and delays that allowed rebel forces to escape. This is the third major system failure this month, Commander Valk reported. Engineering says the problems are getting worse. Have they determined the cause? Zexthan asked. They suspect it's related to a batch of defective components that were installed during our last resupply. The supply depot where we got the parts suffered an explosion last month, so we can't verify the component history. Zexthan frowned. More accidents and equipment failures. It seemed like the entire hegemony was falling apart lately. Sir, the sensor officer called out. I'm detecting unusual readings at the edge of the system. It looks like ships. A lot of ships. Rebels? Zexthan asked. No, sir. The sensor profile is unknown. The ships appear to be using some kind of stealth technology. I can barely detect them. On the main screen, fuzzy images began to appear. Ships unlike anything in the hegemony database moved through space with predatory grace. They were sleek and deadly looking, with weapons that seemed to bend light around them. Can we identify their origin? Zexthan asked. The communications officer worked frantically at his station. Sir, I'm receiving a transmission from the lead vessel. Put it through. The voice that filled the bridge was calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its certainty. Hegemony Fleet, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Expeditionary Force. You are guilty of unprovoked aggression against Earth and the murder of 12 young officers who died protecting their home. Surrender immediately or face the consequences. Zexthan felt his blood turn cold. Human Expeditionary Force? But we destroyed all human military assets. Did you? Admiral Chen's voice carried a note of dark amusement. You destroyed 12 training ships crewed by Academy cadets. Did you really think that was our entire military? On the sensor display, more ships were appearing. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. The space around Zexthon's fleet filled with human vessels, each one larger and more advanced than anything the hegemony had ever built. This is impossible, Commander Valk whispered. Where did they come from? Admiral Chen answered the question as if she had heard it. We've been exploring distant galaxies while you've been conquering primitive worlds. We've learned things that would terrify your empire. Now we're home, and we're very, very angry. Zexthon realized with growing horror that everything the hegemony thought they knew about humanity was wrong. The 12 ships at Earth hadn't been their fleet. They had been a training squadron. The real human military was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Chen, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Perhaps we can discuss terms. The time for discussion ended when you fired on our children, Chen replied. You wanted to see humanity's military capabilities. Congratulations. You're about to get a demonstration. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Admiral Zexthon's fleet of 200 ships faced off against over 2,000 human vessels. But the numbers were only part of the problem. The human ships moved like living creatures flowing through space with a grace that seemed to defy physics. Their weapons fired beams of pure energy that cut through hegemony shields as if they were made of paper. All ships, defensive formation, Zexthon ordered. But his command seemed useless. The human fleet didn't attack in the organized waves that hegemony doctrine expected. Instead, they moved like a pack of predators, surrounding and isolating individual ships before destroying them with surgical precision. The first hegemony vessel to fall was the cruiser Iron Fist. 3 human ships approached it from different angles, their weapons creating a web of energy that overloaded every system on the vessel. The cruiser simply stopped working. Engines, weapons, life support, everything failed at once. The crew had just enough time to evacuate before the ship tore itself apart. How are they doing that? Commander Valk asked, watching in horror as another hegemony ship suffered the same fate. Their weapons seemed to be targeting our computer systems directly, the science officer reported. But that should be impossible. Our systems are shielded against electronic warfare. On the main screen, Admiral Chen's flagship moved through the battle like a giant predator. The ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of the Dominion's Wrath, but it moved with impossible speed and grace. Its weapons were works of art, creating patterns of destruction that were almost beautiful to watch. Admiral, the communications officer said, we're receiving transmissions from the human ships. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. What are they saying? They're reading names, sir, human names, and showing images. On the screen, the face of a young woman appeared. She looked barely old enough to be a military officer with bright eyes and a confident smile. Text appeared below her image. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, Earth Defense Force, died defending her homeworld. Another face appeared, a young man with kind eyes and a gentle expression. Ensign David Rodriguez, Earth Defense Force, died protecting innocent civilians. One by one, 12 faces appeared on the screen, young officers who had died 6 months ago in the defense of Earth. The human fleet was broadcasting their images and names as they fought, turning the battle into a memorial service for the dead. For Sarah Kim, came a voice over the communications channel as a human destroyer eliminated a hegemony corvette. For David Rodriguez, another voice called out as a human cruiser disabled a hegemony frigate. The psychological effect was devastating. The hegemony crew found themselves fighting not just ships, but the ghosts of the people they had killed. Every destroyed vessel was accompanied by a name, a face, a life that had been cut short. Sir, we're losing ships faster than we can count them, the tactical officer reported. The human weapons are incredibly advanced. They seem to be using some form of quantum manipulation technology. Zexthon watched his fleet being systematically destroyed. In 30 minutes of fighting, he had lost half his ships while the human fleet seemed untouched. Their technology was so far beyond anything the hegemony possessed that it was like fighting with sticks against laser weapons. "Admiral," Commander Valk said quietly, "perhaps we should consider surrender." Before Zexthan could respond, "Admiral," Chen's voice filled the bridge again. "Admiral Zexthan, your fleet is defeated. Order your remaining ships to power down their weapons and prepare to be boarded." "And if I refuse?" Zexthan asked. "Then you will die with honor just like our children did at Earth. The choice is yours." Zexthan looked around his bridge. His crew was exhausted and terrified. Half his fleet was gone, and the other half was being systematically disabled. There was no shame in surrendering to a superior force. "All ships, cease fire and power down weapons," he ordered. "Prepare to be boarded." The shooting stopped, but the human ships remained in formation around the surviving hegemony vessels. Boarding shuttles began moving between the fleets, and, soon, human soldiers were securing every hegemony ship. When the boarding party reached the bridge of the Dominion's Wrath, Zexthan was surprised by what he saw. The human soldiers were professional and courteous. They secured weapons and restricted movement, but they treated the hegemony crew with respect. The boarding party leader was a tall woman with short gray hair and calm eyes. She approached Zexthan and spoke in perfect hegemony standard language. "Admiral Zexthan, I am Colonel Martinez. You are now a prisoner of the Human Expeditionary Force. You and your crew will be treated according to standard military protocols." "Colonel," Zexthan said, "may I ask what you intend to do with us?" "That depends," Martinez replied. "Admiral Chen wants to speak with you personally. She has questions about hegemony military doctrine and territorial claims." An hour later, Zexthan found himself in the shuttle bay of Admiral Chen's flagship. The ship was even more impressive from the inside than it had been from the outside. The corridors were wide and well lit, with advanced displays showing tactical information in multiple languages. Human crew members moved with purpose and efficiency, but they also seemed relaxed and confident in a way that hegemony personnel rarely did. Admiral Chen met him in a conference room that was larger than most hegemony ship bridges. She was a woman of medium height with dark hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. When she spoke, her voice carried absolute authority. "Admiral Zexthan, please sit down. We have much to discuss." Zexthan took the offered seat, noting that it had been adjusted for his species' physiology. The attention to detail was impressive. "Admiral Chen, may I ask about your fleet? Our intelligence suggested that humanity had only basic spaceflight capabilities." Chen smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "Your intelligence was based on what we wanted you to see. Earth is our home world, but it is not our only world. We have been exploring space for much longer than your empire realizes." She activated a holographic display that showed a star map. Points of light appeared throughout the galaxy, far beyond the borders of hegemony space. "These are human colonies, Admiral. We have been building them for over 300 years, always staying beyond the reach of galactic powers like your empire. We learned long ago that it was safer to remain hidden until we were strong enough to defend ourselves." Zexthan stared at the map in shock. There were hundreds of human settlements, spread across regions of space that the hegemony had never explored. "But the ships at Earth," he said, "they were so primitive compared to your fleet." "Those were Academy training ships," Chen explained. "We maintain a small defensive force at Earth to make the planet appear normally defended. The young officers who died there were on their first training mission." The full horror of what had happened began to dawn on Zexthan. "You mean we attacked a training squadron?" "Exactly. 12 ships crewed by students who had never seen real combat. They died because they chose to defend their homeworld rather than reveal the existence of our real military." Chen stood up and walked to the window that looked out into space. "Admiral, your empire made a critical error. You assumed that what you could see was all that existed. You never considered that a species might choose to hide their true capabilities." "What do you intend to do now?" Zexthan asked. "That depends on your empire's response," Chen replied. "We are currently moving toward the core worlds of the hegemony. Our goal is not conquest, it is justice. Your empire attacked us without provocation and murdered our people. There must be consequences. Zexthon felt a chill run through him. You're planning to attack the hegemony homeworlds? If necessary, Chen said calmly. But we would prefer to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. That's why I want you to send a message to your high command. She handed him a communication device. Tell them what you have seen here. Explain that humanity is not the primitive species they thought we were. Make them understand that continued aggression will only lead to their destruction. Zexthon took the device with trembling hands. What message do you want me to send? The truth, Chen said simply. Tell them that the human fleet is real, that our technology is superior to theirs and that we are coming. Tell them they have one chance to avoid a war they cannot win. And if they refuse to listen? Chen's expression hardened. Then they will learn the same lesson that you learned today. The hard way. As Zexthon composed his message, he thought about the young faces he had seen during the battle. 12 students who had died defending their world, not knowing that their sacrifice would awaken a sleeping giant. The message he sent to Hegemony High Command was simple and direct. Human fleet confirmed. Technology superior. Recommend immediate negotiation. Alternative is total defeat. But even as he sent the message, Zexthon suspected it would not be enough. The hegemony had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They would not surrender, easily, even to a superior force. What he didn't know was that human forces were already moving throughout hegemony space. The sabotage operations that had been weakening hegemony infrastructure for months were accelerating. Supply lines were being cut, communication networks were failing, and key military installations were suffering mysterious accidents. Ambassador Krell, still working alone in his intelligence office, had finally gathered enough evidence to prove his theories about the accidents. But when he tried to present his findings to the High Council, he found that the communication systems were down. His urgent warnings never reached the people who needed to hear them. On military bases throughout the Empire, hegemony officers were discovering that their equipment was failing at critical moments. Weapon systems were malfunctioning, ships were developing mysterious problems, and computer networks were becoming unreliable. The humans had spent months infiltrating hegemony systems, placing hidden viruses and sabotage programs that would activate when needed. Now, as their fleets moved toward the core worlds, they were crippling the Empire's ability to respond. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching as more human fleets emerged from hyperspace. The second fleet had arrived, followed by the third and fourth. Soon she would have over 10,000 ships under her command. Admiral, her communications officer said, we're receiving a response from Hegemony High Command. Put it through. The voice that filled the bridge was arrogant and dismissive. Unknown human vessels. This is High Admiral Thox of the Hegemony Fleet. You are ordered to withdraw from our territory immediately. Any hostile action will be met with overwhelming force. Chen smiled coldly. Overwhelming force? Admiral Thox, I don't think you understand your situation. Your empire is already under attack. Check your supply lines, your communication networks, your military bases. We've been preparing for this war for months. There was a long pause before Thox responded. What are you talking about? The accidents that have been plaguing your empire, Admiral. The equipment failures, the explosions, the system malfunctions. Those weren't accidents. They were the opening moves in a war you started when you attacked our children. Chen turned to her tactical officer. Show him. Across hegemony space, human agents activated the sabotage programs they had spent months installing. Military bases lost power. Communication arrays went offline, and supply depots erupted in carefully timed explosions. The carefully coordinated attack crippled hegemony infrastructure in a matter of minutes. This is impossible. Thox's voice carried shock and disbelief. Your empire has been fighting the wrong war, Chen explained. You thought you were conquering primitive worlds. You never realized that some of those primitives were smarter than you. The human fleet began moving deeper into hegemony space, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy's greatest empire began to feel genuine fear. The hegemony capital world of Supremus had never seen panic like this before. For over 1,000 years, it had been the center of the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Its cities stretched across entire continents, and its orbital stations housed billions of beings from hundreds of different species. Now emergency sirens wailed across the planet as reports poured in from across the empire. Military bases were offline, supply lines were cut, and entire fleets were disappearing without a trace. In the emergency session of the High Council, Chancellor Morvek's multiple heads argued among themselves, while the other council members sat in stunned silence. "This cannot be happening," one of Morvek's heads insisted. "Our intelligence said the humans were primitive." "Our intelligence was wrong," replied another head. "The question is what we do now." High Admiral Thox stood before the council, his usual confidence replaced by barely controlled fear. "Council members, the situation is worse than we initially thought. The human fleet has grown to over 10,000 ships and they are moving toward our core systems. Our attempts to mobilize defensive fleets have failed because our infrastructure has been systematically sabotaged." "How is that possible?" demanded Council Member Zara. "Our security systems are the best in the galaxy." "Apparently not," Thox replied grimly. "The humans have been infiltrating our systems for months. They've placed sleeper agents in our colonies, installed viruses in our computer networks, and sabotaged our supply lines. Everything we thought we knew about this species was wrong." Ambassador Krell finally spoke up from his position at the back of the chamber. "Honored Council, I tried to warn you months ago about the pattern of accidents throughout our territory. If you had listened then, we might have been prepared for this attack." "This is not the time for blame," Chancellor Morvek declared. "What are our options, Admiral?" Thox activated a holographic display showing the current military situation. Red markers indicated human fleet positions, while blue markers showed remaining hegemony forces. The picture was not encouraging. "We have 3 main fleets still operational," Thox explained. "The home fleet here at Supremus, the 2nd fleet at the Xerion shipyards, and the 7th fleet at the outer defensive line. Combined, they represent about 4,000 ships against 10,000 human vessels with superior technology," Krell added grimly. "There is another option," Thox said reluctantly. "We could attempt to negotiate." The council chamber erupted in angry voices. The idea of the mighty hegemony negotiating with a species they had tried to conquer was almost unthinkable. "Negotiate?" Council member Rax shouted. "We are the hegemony. We do not negotiate with primitives. These primitives have destroyed half our military and crippled our infrastructure," Thox pointed out. "Perhaps it's time to reconsider our assessment of their capabilities." Meanwhile, 50 light years away, Admiral Chen was meeting with her fleet commanders aboard the flagship Inevitable. The massive vessel served as both a warship and a mobile command center, coordinating the movements of the largest human military force ever assembled. "Admiral, the 4th Fleet has reached the Xerion system," reported Admiral Park, commander of the 2nd Fleet. "They've encountered significant hegemony resistance there." "Expected," Chen replied, studying the tactical displays. "The Xerion shipyards are critical to their war effort. They'll fight hard to defend them." Admiral Torres, the youngest of the fleet commanders, leaned forward in her chair. "Ma'am, our intelligence suggests that the hegemony is trying to rally their remaining forces for a last stand at their capital. Should we engage them directly?" Chen considered the question carefully. The human fleets had the technological advantage, but the hegemony still had significant numbers. A direct assault on their capital would be costly in both ships and lives. "No," she said finally. "We're not here to slaughter everyone in the galaxy. We're here to make a point. Admiral Park, I want you to take the 2nd Fleet and demonstrate our capabilities at the outer defensive line. Show them what our weapons can do, but offer them a chance to surrender." "And if they refuse?" Park asked. "Then we show them the consequences of their choice," Chen replied coldly. The battle at the outer defensive line became the stuff of legend. The hegemony 7th Fleet consisted of 800 ships, including some of the most powerful vessels in their navy. They had positioned themselves in a defensive formation around a critical hyperspace junction, hoping to slow the human advance. When Admiral Park's fleet arrived, the hegemony commander, Admiral Vorth, was confident in his chances. His ships outnumbered the humans 2-1, and they were fighting in a defensive position of their choosing. Human fleet, this is Admiral Vorth of the Hegemony 7th Fleet. You are trespassing in sovereign hegemony space. Withdraw immediately or face destruction. Admiral Park's response was transmitted on all frequencies, ensuring that every ship in both fleets could hear it. Admiral Vorth, you are defending an empire that attacked innocent civilians and murdered children. We offer you one chance to surrender with honor. Accept it. Never. Vorth replied. The hegemony does not bow to primitives. Very well, Park said sadly. You have chosen your fate. What happened next defied everything the hegemony thought they knew about space warfare. The human ships began to move in patterns that seemed impossible. They phased in and out of normal space, appearing behind hegemony vessels and disappearing before return fire could reach them. Their weapons created fields of energy that ignored shields and armor, reaching directly into enemy ships to disable critical systems. But the most terrifying weapon in the human arsenal was not technological. It was psychological. As the battle raged, the human ships continued their memorial broadcasts. The faces of the 12 young officers who had died at Earth appeared on every screen, their names spoken with reverence and anger. For Lieutenant Kim, a human captain shouted as his ship disabled a hegemony cruiser. For Ensign Rodriguez, another voice called out as a hegemony battleship lost power and began to drift. The hegemony crews found themselves fighting not just superior technology, but also the weight of their own guilt. Every disabled ship was a reminder of the innocent lives they had taken. Every spoken name was an accusation that cut deeper than any weapon. Admiral Vorth watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically dismantled. The human ships moved, like ghosts, striking without warning and vanishing before his weapons could respond. His most powerful vessels were reduced to drifting hulks in minutes. Sir, his tactical officer said with a shaking voice, we've lost 60% of our fleet. Recommend immediate withdrawal. No, Vorth shouted. We are the hegemony. We do not retreat. But even as he spoke, more of his ships were falling, silent. The human weapons seemed to target the will to fight as much as the ships themselves. Crews were surrendering rather than face the psychological warfare that accompanied each attack. Admiral Vorth, came Admiral Park's voice over the communications channel. Your fleet is defeated. Order your remaining ships to stand down and no more lives will be lost. Vorth looked around his bridge. His crew was exhausted and demoralized. Half his fleet was gone, and the other half was barely functional. The human fleet remained untouched, their ships moving through space like predators that had barely begun to hunt. All ships, he said quietly, cease fire and prepare to surrender. The news of the 7th Fleet's defeat reached the capital within hours. When the reports arrived, the High Council finally began to understand the true scope of the threat they faced. 800 ships, Chancellor Morveck said in disbelief. The 7th Fleet was one of our most powerful forces, and they barely scratched the human fleet. The human weapons are beyond anything we've encountered, Thox reported. They seem to be using some form of dimensional manipulation technology. Our shields and armor are useless against them. Ambassador Krell stood up slowly. Council members, I have been studying the human tactics and technology. I believe I understand what we are facing. Explain, Morveck ordered. The humans are not just more advanced than us, Krell said carefully. They are more advanced than anyone in the galaxy. Their technology suggests they have been exploring regions of space that we didn't even know existed. They have learned things that our science cannot explain. What are you saying? Councilmember Zara asked. I'm saying that we are not dealing with a primitive species that got lucky, Krell replied. We are dealing with an advanced civilization that has been hiding its true capabilities for centuries. They are so far beyond us technologically that this war is not a battle between equals. It's an extermination. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The mighty hegemony, ruler of the galaxy for 1,000 years, was facing an enemy that could destroy them without effort. "What do they want?" Morvek asked finally. "Justice," came a new voice from the chamber's communication system. Every head turned as Admiral Chen's image appeared on the main display. Somehow the humans had infiltrated even the most secure communication systems on the capital world. "Council members," Chen said calmly. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Expeditionary Force. I believe it's time we talked." "How did you access our secure channels?" Thox demanded. "The same way we accessed your military networks, your supply systems, and your defensive installations," Chen replied. "Your security was designed to keep out primitive species. We are not primitive." Chancellor Morvek's heads consulted among themselves before speaking. "Admiral Chen, what are your terms?" "Simple," Chen said. "The immediate and unconditional surrender of all hegemony military forces, the resignation of the current High Council, and the establishment of a new galactic government based on principles of equality and representation rather than conquest and oppression." "And if we refuse?" Morvek asked. Chen's expression hardened. "Then we will demonstrate what happens when you attack humanity's children. Your choice, Chancellor. Peace with honor, or war without mercy." The communication ended, leaving the council in stunned silence. Outside the chamber windows, they could see the first human ships appearing at the edge of the system. The fleet that had conquered the galaxy was coming home, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the hegemony was afraid. In the distance, more ships continued to arrive. The human fleet grew larger by the hour, and with each new arrival, the message became clearer. This was not just revenge for the attack on Earth. This was the end of an empire and the beginning of something new. The galaxy would never be the same. 2 years had passed since the surrender of the hegemony, and the galaxy was transforming in ways that no one could have imagined. The war had ended not with massive battles and destruction, but with a simple transmission from Chancellor Morvek. Faced with overwhelming human military superiority and the complete failure of hegemony infrastructure, the ruling council had chosen surrender over annihilation. The humans had accepted the surrender with a grace that surprised everyone. Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of the space station that now orbited the former hegemony capital world. The massive structure served as the headquarters of the new Galactic Confederation, a democratic government that represented over 10,000 different species across the galaxy. "Admiral, the morning briefing is ready," said Colonel Martinez, who had become Chen's chief of staff after the war. "Thank you, Colonel. Any major issues today?" "The usual growing pains," Martinez replied. "Some of the former hegemony worlds are still adjusting to having actual representation in government, and we're still discovering new human colonies that want to join the Confederation." Chen nodded. The revelation of humanity's true extent had been one of the biggest surprises of the post-war period. As hidden human settlements throughout the galaxy revealed themselves, it became clear that humanity had been the galaxy's most successful, colonizing species for centuries. "How many new colonies this week?" Chen asked. 17, Martinez replied, "including 3 in regions that we didn't even know were inhabited. The exploration fleets have been busy. They walked through the corridors of the station, passing beings from dozens of different species. Former hegemony soldiers worked alongside human engineers, while alien diplomats debated policy with human politicians. The integration had been surprisingly smooth, though not without challenges. In the main conference room, the daily briefing was already underway. Admiral Zexthan, now serving as a military advisor to the Confederation, was presenting a report on the integration of former hegemony forces. "The transition continues to proceed well," he was saying. "Most former hegemony officers have adapted to the new command structure. There have been some complaints about the democratic decision-making process, but overall morale is improving." Chen took her seat at the head of the table. "Any major concerns, Admiral?" Zexthan looked uncomfortable. "There is one issue, Admiral Chen. Some of the younger hegemony officers are asking questions about human military capabilities. They want to know why your technology is so advanced." "What kind of questions?" Chen asked. "They're wondering where humanity has been for the past few centuries. Our historical records show no evidence of human civilization before your appearance at Earth. Yet your colonies are spread across regions of space that would take thousands of years to reach with conventional technology. Chen exchanged glances with Colonel Martinez. This was a conversation they had been expecting for some time. Admiral Zexton, Chen said carefully, what do you know about interdimensional travel? Interdimensional? Zexton looked confused. That's theoretical physics. No species has ever achieved practical interdimensional technology. No species in this galaxy, Chen corrected. Admiral, I think it's time you learned the full truth about humanity. She activated the room's holographic display, showing a three-dimensional map of local space. The familiar spiral arms of their galaxy appeared, with thousands of points of light marking inhabited systems. This is what you know as the galaxy, Chen said. But it's not the only galaxy. The display zoomed out, showing more spiral structures around their own. These are the neighboring galaxies. For the past 500 years, humanity has been exploring them. Zexton stared at the display in shock. You mean there are other galaxies with intelligent life? Dozens of them, Chen confirmed. We've made contact with civilizations that make the old hegemony look primitive. We've learned technologies that seemed impossible, and we've discovered threats that make galactic conquest seem like a children's game. She changed the display to show a star map that stretched beyond anything Zexton had ever imagined. Points of light indicated human colonies, exploration bases, and diplomatic outposts scattered across multiple galaxies. The Earth Defense Force that you encountered was exactly what we said it was, a training squadron, Chen continued. Our real military has been dealing with threats that span multiple dimensions. The fleet that defeated the hegemony was a small expeditionary force that we recalled when Earth was attacked. Small? Zexton asked weakly. 10,000 ships? Was a small force? A tiny fraction of our actual military, Chen confirmed. Admiral, humanity has been preparing for threats that make the hegemony look peaceful. We've encountered species that consume entire galaxies, energy beings that exist outside normal space-time, and artificial intelligences that span multiple dimensions. Colonel Martinez took over the briefing. What we learned from these encounters is that the greatest strength any civilization can have is unity. Species that fight among themselves are easily conquered by external threats. That's why we chose to create the Confederation instead of simply establishing a human empire. You could have ruled the galaxy, Zexton said. Why didn't you? Because ruling through fear and oppression makes you weak, Chen replied. The hegemony controlled thousands of species, but they were always one rebellion away from collapse. The Confederation is built on voluntary cooperation and mutual benefit. It's much stronger. The display changed again, showing the rapid expansion of the Confederation over the past 2 years. Former hegemony worlds had not only joined willingly, but many were contributing resources and knowledge that strengthened the entire organization. Admiral Zexton, Chen said, I'm going to share something with you that we've never told anyone outside of human command. The reason we've been exploring other galaxies is because we've detected something approaching our local cluster, something that will make the hegemony's conquest look like a minor disagreement. What kind of something? Zexton asked. We call them the Devourers, Chen said grimly. They're a machine intelligence from outside our dimensional space. They consume entire galaxies to fuel their expansion. Our long-range sensors suggest they'll reach our area in approximately 50 years. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. 50 years, Zexton said slowly. What can we do against something like that? Together? We might have a chance, Chen replied. Alone? Every species in the galaxy would be extinct within a decade. She turned to address the entire room. This is why the Confederation exists, not to replace the hegemony with another empire, but to unite every intelligent species in preparation for a threat that none of us could face alone. Admiral Zexton looked at the star maps showing the vast scope of human exploration and the approaching threat. Admiral Chen, why are you telling me this? Because we need help, Chen said simply. Human technology is advanced, But we can't defend multiple galaxies with just our own forces. We need every species, every world, every intelligence working together. What about the species that refuse to cooperate? Asked Ambassador Krell, who had been listening quietly from the back of the room. We hope there won't be any, Chen replied. But if necessary, we'll use the same methods we used on the hegemony. Sometimes you have to demonstrate the consequences of isolation before people understand the benefits of cooperation. The briefing continued for another hour, covering the practical details of preparing for an interdimensional threat. When it ended, Admiral Zexthon approached Chen privately. Admiral, I have one more question, he said. The 12 officers who died at Earth, did they know about any of this? Chen's expression softened. No, they didn't. They were Academy cadets on their first training mission. They knew Earth was important, but they didn't know why. They died protecting a world they thought was their species' only home. They died believing they were humanity's last hope, Zexthon said. In a way they were, Chen replied. Their sacrifice awakened something in humanity that we had forgotten. For centuries we've been focused on exploration and discovery. But when our children died defending Earth, we remembered that some things are worth fighting for. She gestured toward the observation windows where the lights of the Confederation capital stretched into the distance. Everything you see here exists because 12 young officers chose to fight an impossible battle. They gave us the time and the motivation to come home and build something better. Zexthon nodded slowly. And now we face an even greater threat. Yes, Chen agreed, but we face it together. The hegemony tried to rule through fear and conquest. The Confederation is built on hope and cooperation. When the Devourers arrive, they'll find a galaxy united, not divided. As they stood watching the busy traffic of ships moving between the Confederation worlds, a new group of vessels appeared on the horizon. They were sleek human ships, but their design was unlike anything Zexthon had seen before. Admiral, what are those ships? He asked. Chen smiled. The 7th Exploration Fleet returning from the Andromeda Galaxy. They've been gone for 3 years, studying Devourer technology and looking for weaknesses. Did they find any? We'll know soon enough, Chen replied. But that's the advantage of having thousands of colonies across multiple galaxies. Even if the Devourers destroy our local cluster, humanity will survive. And so will our allies. The ships docked at the station, and Chen could see the crews disembarking. They looked tired but determined, carrying data crystals that contained 3 years of research into their greatest enemy. Admiral Zexthon, Chen said, would you like to attend the debriefing? You might learn something interesting about humanity's real military capabilities. Zexthon hesitated. Admiral, I'm not sure I want to know how much more powerful you are than we thought. Chen laughed. Admiral, the fleet that defeated the hegemony represented about 1% of our total military strength. The ships you're looking at now? They're from our science division. Our actual combat fleets are considerably larger. As they walked toward the debriefing room, Zexthon reflected on how much the galaxy had changed. 2 years ago, he had been a conquering admiral serving an empire that believed itself invincible. Now he was an advisor to a democratic confederation, preparing to fight an enemy that threatened all of existence. The irony was not lost on him. The hegemony had spent 1,000 years conquering primitive species, never realizing that the most advanced civilization in the galaxy had been hiding in plain sight. They had attacked Earth thinking it was a helpless world, only to discover that they had awakened a sleeping giant. But perhaps the greatest irony was that humanity's response to aggression had been to create something better than what they had destroyed. The Confederation was stronger, more just, and more unified than the hegemony had ever been. As they entered the debriefing room, Chen turned to Zexthon one last time. Admiral, you asked me once why we didn't simply establish a human empire after defeating the hegemony. The answer is simple. Empires fall, confederations endure. When the Devourers arrive, they'll discover that this galaxy is no longer divided. They'll face not just humanity but every intelligent species working together. And if that's not enough? Zexthon asked. Chen's smile was cold and determined. Then they'll learn what happens when you threaten humanity's children. All of them. Outside the station, the stars shone peacefully, but Admiral Zexton now knew that appearances could be deceiving. Somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, an ancient enemy was approaching. But for the first time since learning about the threat, he felt hope. The galaxy was no longer alone. They had 50 years to prepare, and they would not waste them. The real war was yet to come, but this time they would be ready. The year was 2157. The stars no longer seemed friendly to the people of Earth. 6 months ago, huge ships had appeared in orbit around the planet. They belonged to the Galactic Conclave, a group of 7 alien species that ruled most of the known galaxy. At first, people celebrated. Humans were not alone in the universe. But joy turned to fear when the aliens said they had come to judge humanity, not welcome them. Commander Alexander Wright stood at the window of the International Space Station. His blue uniform was neat, but his face showed worry. Far below, Earth looked peaceful, with its swirls of white clouds and blue oceans. But on the surface, people were afraid. The alien ships were visible at night, bright spots that moved across the sky. "Commander, Ambassador Grant is requesting to speak." "With you," said the station's computer. Alexander sighed. Eleanor Grant was Earth's main representative to the aliens. Their talks were not going well. "Put her through," he said. Eleanor's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired. Her gray suit was wrinkled, and her usually perfect brown hair was messy. "Alex, they've made their decision. It's not good." Alexander's heart sank. "Tell me." "They say we're too dangerous, too unpredictable. They're going to lock us in our solar system." "They can't do that." Alexander hit the wall with his fist. "We have the right to explore space just like they do." "They don't see it that way," Eleanor said. "They say our mix of intelligence and aggression makes us a threat. They're putting robot stations at the edge of our solar system to make sure we don't leave." Alexander looked out at the alien ships. They were beautiful in a strange way, with their curved shapes that seemed impossible. But now they represented a prison. "There has to be something we can do," he said. "I've tried everything," Eleanor replied. "They won't change their minds." The next day, Alexander and Eleanor met with Zelther, the main speaker for the conclave. Zelther was tall, with blue skin and 4 arms. Its voice sounded like music, but its words were harsh. "Your species learns too quickly," Zelther said. "You went from simple planes to space travel in less than a century, and your history is full of wars. We cannot allow such a species to spread across the galaxy." "We've grown past our violent history," Eleanor argued. "We've had global peace for 30 years. "A moment in the life of a species," Zelther dismissed her words with a wave of its hand. "The decision is final. You will remain in your solar system." After the meeting, Alexander reviewed secret recordings made by Earth spies. In private, the aliens spoke differently. "These humans adapt to any situation," one alien said to another. "Their technology grows faster than any species we've seen. If we let them into the wider galaxy, they could become more powerful than us in a few hundred years." "Then we are agreed," another alien replied. "They must be contained." Alexander now understood the truth. The aliens weren't worried about human violence. They were afraid of human potential. He called Captain Olivia Martinez, who commanded Earth's newest spaceship, the Defiance. The ship had been built in secret, using technology learned from studying the alien ships. "Olivia, the Conclave has decided to trap us in the solar system. We need to act on Plan Exodus." Olivia's face grew serious. "Are you sure, sir? Once we launch, there's no coming back." "I'm sure. Earth will be a prison. We need some humans to escape, to keep our freedom among the stars." For 3 weeks, the Defiance was prepared in secret. 5,000 people were chosen to leave. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, farmers, doctors, teachers, people with skills to build a new human society far from Earth. They also took seeds, animal embryos, and libraries of human knowledge. The Defiance had special engines that could travel faster than light based on stolen alien designs. It also had new cryo-sleep chambers that could keep people asleep for hundreds of years without aging. On the day of launch, Alexander met with Olivia on the ship. "You should come with us, Commander," Olivia said. Alexander shook his head. "My place is here. Earth will need leaders who understand what happened, who can help our people accept this prison while planning for the day we break free." They shook hands for the last time. "Find us a new home," Alexander said, "and someday come back for us." Olivia nodded. "I promise." That night, while the alien ships were on the far side of Earth, the Defiance launched. Its special engines activated just beyond the moon, and the ship vanished into the darkness of space. The next day, the aliens discovered what had happened. Their leader, Zelthur, was angry. "You have broken our first rule," it told Alexander and Eleanor. "There will be punishment." Alien ships bombed Earth's main spaceports. Thousands died. The attacks destroyed most of Earth's ability to build spaceships. "Let this be a lesson," Zelthur said. "Try to escape again, and the punishment will be worse." Robot stations were placed at the edge of the solar system. They would destroy any ship that tried to leave. Earth was now cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Alexander stood again at the window of the space station, looking down at Earth. "This isn't the end," he said quietly. "It's just the beginning. The Defiance got away. Humanity is out there among the stars now, and someday, we'll find a way to break these chains." He didn't know then how long it would take. He didn't know about the century and a half of struggle ahead, or how humanity would change during that time. He didn't know that when humans finally returned to the galaxy, they would come not as explorers but as rulers. But he believed in human strength and determination, and in that, he was right. The exile had begun, but so had humanity's greatest journey. 150 years passed after the Defiance fled Earth. The small ship that had carried 5,000 hopeful humans had grown into something amazing. Now, the descendants of those first brave people lived on 43 huge ships that traveled together through the stars. They called themselves the Stellar Nomads. Fleet Admiral Samantha Collins stood on the bridge of the largest ship, the Legacy. At 38 years old, she was young for such an important job, but she had proven herself many times. Her great-grandmother had been one of the original crew members on the Defiance. "Admiral, all ships report ready for the jump," said her second-in-command Jack Porter. Samantha nodded. "Then let's proceed." She watched the stars on the main screen. The Legacy and the other ships in the fleet used special engines that could fold space, making journeys that would take years happen in minutes. The Nomads had taken the alien technology they'd stolen and made it better. The stars blurred, and then new stars appeared. The fleet had jumped to another part of the galaxy far from any conclave patrol routes. "Jump successful," Jack reported. "All ships present and accounted for." Samantha smiled. The fleet now carried over 200,000 humans. In their century and a half of wandering, the Nomads had built a unique society. They had kept the best parts of Earth culture, but adapted to life in space. Later that day, Samantha visited the farm sections of the Legacy. Here, plants grew under special lights, providing food and oxygen for the ship. Children ran between rows of corn and tomatoes, playing games while their parents worked. Paul Davis, the head farmer, greeted her with a smile. "Admiral Collins, come to check on our new apple trees?" "I have," she replied. "How are they doing?" "Better than expected. These new ones should produce fruit in half the time of Earth varieties." This was typical of nomad life. Everything they did was focused on efficiency and survival. Their scientists worked constantly to improve their technology, their crops, even themselves. Samantha made her way to the science lab next. Dr. Lisa Freeman was waiting for her. "You wanted to see me, Doctor?" Samantha asked. Lisa nodded. Her eyes were strange, with silver flecks that seemed to glow slightly. Many of the newer generations of nomads had developed these eyes, along with something else. "The telepathy studies are showing interesting results," Lisa said. "Almost 30% of children born in the last 20 years show some ability." This was perhaps the most surprising change in the nomads. After generations in space, exposed to strange radiations, and living with alien technology, some humans had developed the ability to sense each other's thoughts and feelings. It wasn't strong yet, mostly just sensing emotions or very simple ideas, but it was growing stronger with each new generation. Is it helping with the ship connections? Samantha asked. Yes. The telepathic navigators can coordinate jumps better than any computer system. It's giving us an edge that the Conclave doesn't have. The Nomads knew about the Conclave from their long-range scans and from the occasional brave mission to observe alien worlds from a distance. They knew the aliens still ruled the galaxy. They knew Earth was still trapped. That evening, Samantha met with the ship captains in the fleet's central meeting room. The walls showed images of Earth, mountains, oceans, forests, places none of them had ever seen except in recordings. We've been wandering for 6 generations, said Captain Ryan Cooper of the ship Horizon. Some people are asking if we'll ever go back to Earth. Samantha understood their concern. We will go back, but not until we're ready to break the quarantine permanently. Not until we can free all of humanity. The captains nodded. They all knew the history, the mission that had been passed down from the original crew of the Defiance. Our scouts have reported something concerning, Samantha continued. There's unusual activity in the Vega sector. The main display showed a star system they had never visited before. We detected radio signals from this planet 6 months ago. A new spacefaring civilization, just beginning to explore their own solar system. Like humans were before the Conclave arrived, said Captain Olivia Kent of the ship Discovery. Exactly. But now there's heavy Conclave traffic in the system, and the radio signals have stopped. The room grew quiet as everyone understood what this meant. They're eliminating them, Ryan said softly. Just like they tried to lock us away. Samantha nodded. We've suspected for years that the Conclave doesn't just quarantine species they find threatening. Sometimes they eliminate them completely. We need to see for ourselves, said Olivia. If this is true, it changes everything we thought we knew about the Conclave. The next week, the Legacy and 2 smaller ships made a careful jump to the edge of the Vega system. They used their most advanced stealth technology to avoid detection. What they saw confirmed their worst fears. The planet that had sent out radio signals was now partially destroyed. Conclave ships surrounded it, methodically bombarding the surface. In the observation room, Samantha and her officers watched in horror. They never even had a chance, Jack whispered. They weren't a threat to anyone. This is what would have happened to Earth if we had tried to fight back when they first came, Samantha said. The Conclave doesn't just contain species they think are dangerous. They eliminate any potential competition before it can grow. She turned to her officers, her eyes hard with determination. It's time to change our plans. We've spent generations hiding, growing stronger, developing our technology, but we can't wait any longer. What are you suggesting, Admiral? Asked Jack. It's time to go home, she said. Time to return to Earth and show them what humanity has become. And then together we're going to change this galaxy. None of them knew exactly what waited for them back at Earth. Had their homeworld grown and developed despite the quarantine? Or had the Conclave's restrictions crushed the human spirit? They would soon find out. The stellar nomads turned their ships toward the Sol system, toward Earth, the home none of them had ever seen but all of them dreamed of. The Wanderers were about to return. The stellar nomad fleet appeared at the edge of the Sol system after a final spacefold jump. For the first time in 150 years, humans who had been born among the stars looked upon the sun that had given life to their ancestors. Fleet. Admiral Samantha Collins stood silently on the bridge of the Legacy. On the main screen, a small blue dot was visible. Earth, the home planet none of them had ever seen except in pictures and videos. Scan the system, she ordered. Let's see what we're dealing with. The crew worked quickly. Soon, the results appeared on Samantha's screen. Admiral, we're detecting the Conclave Sentinel stations at the system's edge, just as our records indicated. They appear to be still active. What about Earth? Any signs of space travel? Jack Porter, her second-in-command, looked up with surprise. Yes, Admiral. Quite a lot, actually. There are several space stations in orbit around Earth, and we're detecting ships moving between Earth, Mars, and the moons of Jupiter. Samantha raised her eyebrows. So they've developed, despite the quarantine. Good. What about the Sentinels? Have they detected us? No, Admiral. Our stealth systems are working perfectly. The Sentinels don't see us. Samantha nodded. This was an advantage of their advanced technology. The Nomads could see the Sentinels, but the Sentinels couldn't see them. Send a small scout ship to get closer to Earth. I want to know more about what's happening there before we make contact. 3 days later, the scout ship returned with surprising news. Earth had not only maintained its space program despite the quarantine, but had been secretly working on ways to break free. Dr. Nathan Rogers, Earth's leading scientist, had finally decoded the Sentinel technology and was preparing to test a way to disable them. They're planning to break out just as we're coming back in, Samantha said with a smile. Perfect timing. She made a decision. It's time to make contact. Send a message to Earth's leadership. Text only, on their secure military channels. The message was simple. From the children of the Defiance to the people of Earth. We have returned. We bring knowledge, technology, and a warning about the true nature of the conclave. Request secure meeting coordinates. On Earth, President Alan Donovan was in the middle of a meeting with his military advisors when the message came through. He read it twice, his face showing shock. The Defiance? After all this time? He whispered. The Defiance was a legend on Earth, the ship that had escaped before the quarantine carrying the hope of humanity with it. For generations, people had wondered what had happened to those 5,000 brave souls. Now they knew. They had survived. They had thrived. And they had come back. 2 days later, a small ship from the Nomad fleet landed at a secret base in the Rocky Mountains. Samantha Collins stepped onto Earth soil for the first time in her life. The gravity felt strange after a lifetime in space. The open sky above her was both beautiful and frightening. President Donovan was waiting with Dr. Nathan Rogers and General Frank Williams, the head of Earth's military. Welcome home, Donovan said, extending his hand. Samantha shook it firmly. Thank you, Mr. President. Though I must admit this is the first time any of us have set foot on Earth. They went inside to talk. Samantha explained who the Nomads were. The descendants of the Defiance crew, now 200,000 strong. She told them about their advanced technology, especially their space-folding drives that were far beyond what the Conclave used. Then, she told them what they had discovered about the Conclave. They're not peaceful diplomats. They're conquerors who eliminate any species that might one day challenge them. We witnessed them destroying an emerging civilization in the Vega system. They would have done the same to Earth if they hadn't decided to quarantine us instead. President Donovan looked grim. We suspected something like this. Our spies have intercepted Conclave communications over the years. They sometimes argue about whether the human problem should be solved more permanently. Dr. Rogers spoke next. We've been working on a way to disable the Sentinel stations. We're almost ready for our first test. That's good news, Samantha said. But we need to think beyond just breaking the quarantine. The Conclave will respond, with force. We need to be ready for war. What do you suggest? Asked General Williams. An alliance between Earth and the Nomad fleet. Your military strength combined with our advanced technology. Together we can challenge the Conclave. Dr. Rogers had another piece of important information to share. I've made a crucial discovery. The Conclave relies on a network of ancient artifacts for their faster-than-light travel and communication. These artifacts were built by a species that disappeared long ago. Yes, we've observed those, Samantha said. But our space-folding technology works on completely different principles. We don't need their network. That gives us a critical advantage, General Williams said, understanding immediately. We can move freely while they're tied to fixed routes. For the next month, humans from Earth and the Nomad fleet worked together. Dr. Rogers collaborated with Dr. Lisa Freeman, the Nomad's chief scientist, to develop weapons that could penetrate Conclave defenses. Lieutenant Ben Harris, Earth's tactical expert, was amazed by the Nomad's telepathic navigators. "This changes everything we thought we knew about space combat," he said after watching a demonstration. "Your ships can coordinate in ways ours never could." Meanwhile, Earth's leaders told their people about the returned Nomads. Some were suspicious at first, but most were excited. The return of their long-lost brothers and sisters from space felt like a miracle. The two branches of humanity were different in many ways. Earth humans had developed their own culture in isolation, focused on unity and survival against the day they might face the conclave again. Nomad humans had adapted to life in space, developing new technologies and even new abilities, but they were still family, and now they had a common enemy. On the day of the test, ships from Earth and the Nomad fleet positioned themselves near one of the Sentinel stations. Dr. Rogers activated his device. The Sentinel's lights flickered and went dark. "It worked," he shouted. Samantha nodded with satisfaction. "Earth's quarantine is broken, but we shouldn't announce our freedom yet. Let's keep operating in secret, preparing for the larger conflict while the conclave remains unaware." Through captured conclave databases, the humans made another shocking discovery. They weren't the first species to be banished. Others had been completely destroyed when they grew too powerful, their histories erased from galactic records. "We won't suffer the same fate," Samantha said firmly. "It's time for humanity to take its place in the galaxy, and this time we're not asking for permission." The conclave had no idea what was coming. The species they had banished and forgotten was about to return, not as supplicants, but as rulers. 5 years passed after the humans of Earth and the stellar Nomads joined forces. During this time, they fought a shadow war against the conclave. The aliens still did not know that Earth had broken free of its prison, or that the descendants of the Defiance had returned. Special Agent Keith Perry led a team of human spies on the conclave's central world of Aldaris Prime. He looked like any other worker in the great trading city, with a hood hiding his human features. The aliens thought he was a member of the Laran species, who looked somewhat like humans. Keith walked through the busy market, sending coded messages to his team. Today was important. After years of work, they were finally ready to strike at the heart of the conclave's power. "Team check," he whispered into his hidden communicator. "Alpha ready," came the reply from Linda Hayes, hidden near the central government building. "Beta ready," said Ryan West, who was positioned at the city's main power station. "Gamma ready," reported Susan Clark from the spaceport. Keith smiled. "Execute in 5 minutes." While the spies prepared their mission on Aldaris Prime, Admiral Samantha Collins stood on the bridge of the Legacy. Her fleet was hidden in the shadow of a gas giant waiting. On the main screen, she could see other human ships in position around the system. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said Jack Porter. Samantha nodded. "Send the signal to our ground teams." Back on Aldaris Prime, Keith and his team moved into action. They had spent years building a network of allies across dozens of worlds. Not just humans, but other species who suffered under conclave rule. The Valen, a species with 4 arms and golden skin, had been forced to work in mines for centuries. The Eridu, tall beings who could photosynthesize like plants, had their homeworld taken for conclave farming. The insect-like Zith had been used as expendable soldiers in conclave wars. All of them had joined the human resistance. Keith reached the central data hub of Aldaris Prime. This was where the conclave kept their most important records. With Linda covering him, he connected a small device to the main computer. "Download starting," he said into his communicator. "We'll have everything in 3 minutes." Across the city, Ryan disabled the alarms at the power station. Susan's team secured a landing pad for their escape ship. Suddenly, alarms began to sound. "Throughout the city, we've been detected," Linda shouted. Keith worked faster. 2 more minutes, keep them off me." Linda fired her weapon at approaching conclave security forces. The human weapons, designed with Nomad technology, easily penetrated the aliens' armor. 1 minute, Keith said, watching the progress bar on his device. The security forces were getting closer. Linda was hit in the arm but kept fighting. 30 seconds, Keith reported. Finally, the device beeped. Download complete. Fall back to the extraction point. The human team fought their way to the spaceport where Susan had secured their ship. They launched just as Conclave fighters took off in pursuit. Admiral, the ground team is away, but they have company, Jack reported on the Legacy. Right on schedule, Samantha said. Bring the fleet in. The human fleet appeared from behind the gas giant, surprising the Conclave ships. Using their space-folding drives, they moved in ways the aliens couldn't predict. Earth ships, commanded by General Frank Williams, attacked in tight formations, while Nomad ships executed impossible maneuvers. The Conclave forces were thrown into confusion. They had never faced such tactics before. Keith's small ship reached the safety of the human fleet. He immediately transmitted the stolen data to Admiral Collins. We got everything, Admiral. Their entire history. Their plans. Everything. Samantha watched as the information appeared on her screen. What she saw shocked her. The Conclave wasn't just 7 species working together. It was a hierarchy, with the oldest species, the progenitors, controlling everything. The progenitors had spent thousands of years eliminating potential rivals. Hundreds of promising young species had been destroyed or imprisoned, just like humans. We need to share this with everyone, Samantha said. Not just humans, but all species in the galaxy. She gave orders to broadcast the Conclave's secret history on all channels. As the truth spread, many worlds that had been loyal to the Conclave began to question their leaders. Ambassador Grace Wilson, Earth's chief diplomat, worked tirelessly to form alliances with these wavering worlds. 3 of the 7 Conclave species, seeing the evidence of their leaders' deception, decided to join the human alliance. The galaxy erupted into civil war. Earth forces, led by General Williams, fought conventional battles, while Nomad fleets, under Admiral Collins, executed lightning strikes using their space-folding technology. The Conclave, despite having more ships, couldn't counter humanity's unpredictable tactics. 6 months into the war, the humans prepared for their most daring attack yet. The Centauri Nexus was a key junction in the Conclave's network of ancient artifacts. Control of this nexus would allow humans to disrupt Conclave travel across an entire sector. Admiral Collins briefed her captains on the plan. The Conclave expects us to attack directly. Instead, we'll use a small force to draw their fleet here. She pointed to a spot on the star map. Meanwhile, our main fleet will strike the Nexus itself. The captains nodded in agreement. This was the kind of creative thinking that had kept humanity ahead in the war so far. The battle began the next day. Earth ships engaged the Conclave fleet, appearing to fight desperately against superior numbers. The Conclave commander, believing he had caught the humans in a mistake, called for reinforcements. Soon, over 300 Conclave warships had gathered, ready to crush the human force once and for all. That was when Admiral Collins sprung her trap. The main human fleet appeared on the other side of the Nexus. Dr. Lisa Freeman, using knowledge gained from captured Conclave records, activated a special device that interacted with the ancient artifacts. The Nexus flashed with strange energy. Suddenly, the Conclave ships found their faster-than-light drives disabled. They were stranded, light years from any support. All ships attack, ordered Admiral Collins. The human fleet, though smaller, had the advantage of mobility. They destroyed the Conclave ships one by one. It was the largest victory of the war so far. News of the Battle of Centauri Nexus spread across the galaxy. More worlds defected from the Conclave. The balance of power was shifting. In her quarters after the battle, Admiral Collins looked at a picture of Earth. 5 years of shadow war had become open conflict, and humanity was winning. We're not just fighting for our freedom anymore, she told Jack Porter. We're fighting to change the entire galaxy. The Conclave had ruled for thousands of years, but their time was ending. The species they had banished and forgotten was about to take their place. After the great victory at Centauri Nexus, the war shifted in humanity's favor. Many worlds that had served the Conclave now looked to the humans for leadership. The Conclave was weakening, but they were not defeated yet. The remaining Conclave leaders, the ancient progenitors and their most loyal allies, gathered their forces at Rigel. their ancestral homeworld. They prepared for a final stand. Admiral Samantha Collins and President Alan Donovan met on the Legacy to plan the last battle. "Our scouts report they have gathered over 500 warships at Rigel," said Jack Porter, showing the data on the main screen. "They're desperate," President Donovan said. "That's nearly everything they have left." Admiral Collins studied the information carefully. "This isn't just about winning a battle. It's about how we win. What happens after will shape the galaxy for thousands of years." "What are you suggesting?" asked General Frank Williams. "We don't want to destroy them completely. That would make us no better than they were. We want to force their surrender, and then build something new. Something better." President Donovan nodded in agreement. "A galaxy where different species can develop in their own way, without fear of being destroyed if they become too advanced." The plan they created was bold. The combined human fleet would attack Rigel, but their goal was not to destroy the planet. Instead, they would disable the Conclave's defenses and force them to accept new terms for the galaxy. Dr. Lisa Freeman had another important update to share. "We've been studying the telepathic abilities that developed among the nomads," she said. "We've found that with proper training, our telepaths can detect and sometimes redirect the energy signals used by the ancient artifact network." This was a crucial discovery. The progenitors had built their empire on the control of these artifacts. If humans could interfere with that control, it would give them a decisive advantage. On the day of the battle, the human fleet gathered near Rigel. It was an impressive sight, ships from Earth with their practical, sturdy designs alongside the more elegant vessels of the nomads. Ships from allied species joined them as well. Commander Sofia Martinez, a descendant of the original Defiance captain, led a special team of telepaths on her ship, the Hope. "Remember your training," she told her team. "When you sense the progenitors trying to use the artifact network, be ready to intercept." The human fleet jumped into the Rigel system, immediately engaging the Conclave forces. The battle was fierce. Though outnumbered, the humans fought with creativity and determination. Earth ships formed tight formations, protecting each other, while nomad vessels used their space-folding drives to appear and disappear around the enemy. After hours of fighting, the humans had pushed through to Rigel itself. The progenitors, seeing defeat approaching, activated their final desperate plan. Deep beneath the surface of Rigel, the oldest and most powerful of the ancient artifacts began to glow. The progenitors intended to use it to destroy the entire network, taking most of the civilized galaxy with it rather than surrendering to humans. On the Hope, Sophia's telepath suddenly stiffened. "They're trying to activate something powerful," one of them reported. "I can feel it like a wave building." Sophia contacted Admiral Collins immediately. "Admiral, the progenitors are activating a doomsday weapon. It's connected to the artifact network." Dr. Freeman, who was on the Legacy with Admiral Collins, quickly analyzed the readings. "If they succeed, it will destroy the communication and travel network that most species rely on. Billions will die in the chaos that follows." "Can we stop it?" asked Admiral Collins. "Maybe," Dr. Freeman replied. "Have Commander Martinez direct her telepaths to intercept and redirect the activation signal. Don't try to stop it completely. That might cause feedback that would make things worse. Instead, redirect it to target only the progenitors' command systems." The order was given. On the Hope, Sophia and her team joined hands, forming a mental link that strengthened their abilities. They reached out with their minds, searching for the activation signal. "There," Sophia said. "I can feel it, like a river of fire flowing through the network." Together, the human telepaths inserted themselves into the flow of energy. With careful mental adjustments, they changed its path, narrowing its target from the entire network to just the progenitors' central command. On Rigel, the progenitors watched in horror as their own systems began to fail. Their ships lost power. Their communications went silent. Their weapons shut down. Within an hour it was over. The Conclave leaders had no choice but to surrender. Admiral Collins and President Donovan met with the defeated progenitors to discuss the future of the galaxy. The terms they offered were firm but fair. The conclave as it existed is finished, President Donovan told them. In its place we will establish the Galactic Covenant, a new government based on respect for all species and their right to develop, without interference. The progenitors, ancient and proud, were reluctant to accept these terms. But they had no choice. Their power was broken. In the months that followed, humanity helped establish the new Galactic Covenant. Unlike the conclave, which had forced all species to follow the same path, the Covenant allowed diversity and independence. Each world could develop in its own way, as long as they respected others' right to do the same. The ancient artifact network, now understood and controlled by humans, was repurposed. Instead of being a tool for domination, it became a galaxy-wide system for communication, travel, and early warning against external threats. Commander Sofia Martinez led missions to find other species that had been banished or gone into hiding from the conclave. 3 such species were discovered and welcomed into the Covenant. The former conclave species had to adjust to the new reality. Some adapted quickly, grateful for the end of the progenitors' control. Others struggled, having relied on stolen technology and enslaved species for too long. 200 years after being deemed too dangerous for the stars, humanity stood as the protectors of the galaxy, not through conquest, but through liberation. The first full assembly of the Galactic Covenant, representatives from over 80 species gathered on a newly built space station. Admiral Collins, now gray-haired but still commanding respect, addressed them. We were banished because they feared what we might become, she said. They were right to fear us, not for our capacity for violence, but for our refusal to accept injustice. Not for our ambition to rule, but for our determination to ensure freedom for all. As she spoke, Earth appeared on the main viewing screen. The beautiful blue planet that had given birth to humanity now stood as a symbol of hope for countless worlds. Today marks a new beginning, Admiral Collins continued. A galaxy where no species needs to fear destruction for being too advanced or too different, where cooperation replaces domination, where diversity is celebrated, not suppressed. The former conclave species now understood the truth. Humanity's greatest strength was never their adaptability or intelligence alone, but their unique capacity to unite diverse groups toward a common purpose, a skill the galaxy desperately needed. The species that had been banished and forgotten had returned, not as conquerors, but as founders of a better future for all.